Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Marcella, for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you because not only the wealth of information and experience that you have in this holistic wellness field, but because we have this interesting past that there's been like these connections over time with both of us applying for the same position. And then friends of ours that are also in this field that kept telling me, have you met Marcella? Have you met Marcella? And Tina and Mary Sheila were always um, wanting to make sure we connected. And then years later, doing the same sort of business course. And so it's been very interesting how your name keeps coming up. And finally, I participated in Marcella's Club, which is amazing, and I highly recommend it. And was really taken with your approach, with your style, your compassion comes through. And so everybody, welcome Marcella Friel. And or is it Friel? Did I say that wrong?
Nope, it's Friel. It's like you're saying for real really fast.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like that.
Friel. Thanks for checking.
Good. And so Marcella leads the Women Food and Forgiveness Academy, and she is all about helping us cooperate with our bodies. And her book, Tap, Taste, Heal, is wildly successful, and so are her daily OM courses. And so, Marcella, just tell us a little bit about what got you into this field and how then from being in this holistic wellness, you got into tapping.
Oh my goodness. Well, Thais, thank you so much for having me here. It's really lovely to meet you, lovely to get to know you after all these years.
Yeah.
And gosh, let's see. So way back when, in a previous lifetime, when you and I were applying for the same job, I was teaching culinary arts in a little school that we're both familiar with, Bowman College, Holistic Nutrition and Culinary Arts, and this was in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mhm.
And I was also working as a chef at a 6-bed, very, very exclusive residential treatment facility for women recovering from love addiction. And so I had these two really great jobs that I actually really loved, both of them.
Mhm.
I had the chef job and I was a culinary arts instructor. And the time came around 2013 where, for as much as I loved my work, I felt like I needed a depth charge.
Mhm.
Like, I loved teaching soups and stews and stocks and sauces. It was great. But there was a deeper level of teaching that needed to come out of me.
Mhm.
That's all I knew, and isn't that the way it is sometimes when we're really looking to make big changes in our lives that, all we have is just kind of this feeling,
Yeah.
we don't have a full picture yet, but we just have the feeling like something needs to change, something's not quite right. So 2013 rolled around and yeah, I needed to take my work to a deeper level. And I had been tapping with a practitioner for about 2 years at that point. And she was a master of what I would call unconditional positive regard.
Mhm.
So anything that I could say to her that I felt like I felt so horrible because I did such and such, or oh, I'm such a bad person. And she would say, oh, no, 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 Marcella. Like there was nothing that I could throw at her where she would say, oh, that was terrible. It was really bad. So that was kind of like my training ground. So in 2013, I decided to certify as a tapping practitioner. And my thinking, coming from my culinary background, was, well, I'll just do tapping and I'll help people figure out what to eat. Oh my word. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. So in 2014, I certified as a tapping practitioner. I hung my shingle and women started coming to me. And most of what we talked about had nothing to do with food.
Mhm.
Most of what we ended up talking about having to do with, being bullied as children or various kinds of childhood abuse or, things like this. And there was one point where a woman said to me, She said, some women use razor blades, I use food. Yeah. And this was a woman who was quite large,
Mhm.
and she was eating 9 heads of romaine lettuce at a time,
Wow.
or 2 whole loaves of Ezekiel bread.
Wow.
So her food choices were good, but she was just eating a lot of them. And when we explored what that was, it turned out that as a child, she had been through intense poverty,
Mhm.
and she experienced starvation. And she didn't want to tell her mother that she was starving because she knew that her mother could do nothing about it. And so now it was just like, okay, anything, give me everything, as long as I don't have to be hungry, as long as I don't have to be hungry. So working with her was kind of like this pivot point where there was that moment when she said that about some women use razor blades, I use food, that the words women, food, and forgiveness began. It was like an airplane carrying a banner. It like trailed across the sky of my mind, women, food, and forgiveness. And I realized that, the
Mm.
struggles that we as women have with food, the food is kind of the caboose of the train, so to speak. The food is like the tail end of the story.
Mhm.
And, this is what I've learned in the 10 years since I've been doing this work, Thais, is that, uh, when we struggle with food, we try to fix the food at the level of the food,
Right.
i.e. dieting. And of course, yeah, I don't have to say to anybody watching this or listening to this, we know where that leads. So I myself am a survivor of multiple complex trauma. And I've been a practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism since 1987. I've been in 12-step recovery since 1996. So I
Mm.
have these incredible tools that have been amazingly healing in my life. But it wasn't until I started doing tapping when I really, really got that I am not the traumas of my childhood.
Mhm.
It was a decisive, definitive moment. And so that is what I bring to the work that I do with the women I work with. We are not our traumas. You are not your traumas, right?
Yes.
So, so in 2018, I grabbed Mary Sheila Ganella, who holistic nutritionist, colleague of ours. And I said, come on, Mary Sheila, we got to go. And we started the Women, Food, and Forgiveness Academy. And it is a 12-month program to help women develop complete unconditional self-love as the basis of healing yo-yo dieting, binge eating, sugar addiction, and body shaming.
Yes.
So that's the
Wonderful.
that's the synopsis.
Wow, thank you so much for you were such a great storyteller. I'll keep thinking of the airplane banner, passing. And so much that you shared that really paints the picture of how you got from A to B. And so what I'd love to do is actually explore a little bit more about tapping and talking about what tapping is. And as you said, that was sort of the missing piece, because at some point the only way to move forward is to really step into a different reality, or even a different identity, people say, right? And to do that, we
Exactly.
need to rewire things in our brain. And so tapping is such a great tool for doing that. And so I'd love for you to talk about tapping. And then I also want to pick up on something you mentioned about working with women that were in love addiction recovery. So we'll start with tapping and then come to that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, tapping, for those who aren't familiar with it, it goes by a lot of different names. EFT, emotional freedom techniques. Sometimes it's called meridian tapping. There's all kinds of other variations as well. And essentially what it is a very, very simple stress release tool that helps to uncouple the memory of stressful experiences with the emotional charge.
Mhm.
And what we do is we fingertip tap on points that are at or near the ends of certain acupuncture meridians while we're recollecting a stressful situation. And what that tapping does, well, one thing it does, actually, this is my observation, it moves lymph. Just simply tapping on your face will help to move the lymph, right? And that in itself is a certain release of attachment. But more than that, the tapping sends an electromagnetic pulse, like a little signal, into the limbic system of the brain, and it helps to down regulate that charge. It helps to, it's like a circuit breaker
Mhm.
on the stress signal. So tapping is working with the midbrain. It's working with the mammalian brain. And the limbic system is older than language. So this is why you can have a stressful childhood memory, let's say,
Mhm.
something that happened when you were 4 years old. And you can go to therapy and you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk for 10 years, and you still haven't quite budged it.
Right,
It's because you're the talking just by itself doesn't touch.
right. It
It
keeps
doesn't reach.
reactivation instead often.
Yeah, well, there's that too. So the thing that's really interesting about tapping is you can go back and rehash the whole story, but you really don't have to. All you have to do is kind of recollect the feeling, recollect the body sensation, just have some basic sense of awareness, and just tapping sometimes within minutes, literally something that you've been holding on to for years can just go poof.
Mhm.
And I can tell a great story about this if
Please,
if you
yeah.
know.
It's so rich. I really feel like tapping is sort of an underappreciated tool that has such big impact. So I'd love for you to share more.
Well, there was a woman who I was working with, one of my early clients in Sebastopol, California, and she had a really, really heavy duty diet Pepsi addiction.
Mm,
She had cases of it. In fact, I mentioned this in the first chapter of my book. She had cases of it stockpiled in her garage, and she knew she had to let it go. She had a metabolic syndrome. She was 100 pounds overweight. She had the whole constellation of indicators, right?
yeah.
The whole cocktail. And she had to let it go. But her feeling toward it was like, don't take my diets, don't take it away from me. So we tapped on this, like this feeling, and I actually had her make this gesture, like, and she, tap with one hand and hold that bracing in her body while she was tapping.
Mm,
And I asked her, so what's your earliest memory of this feeling? Like if you go into this feeling. And she went back to loading up her little red wagon when she was a little girl with donuts and soda to run away from home, to get away from her father's abuse.
mm,
So there's another variant of tapping that I work with. It's called matrix reimprinting, where basically you use tapping as a soul retrieval technique.
mm,
So when that memory came up, we went back into, we went back to that little girl. And
mm.
so I invited her to, as her adult self, go back to that little girl and say, honey, it's okay now. You don't have to hold on to this anymore. And of course, lots of tears, lots of release, letting go. She wrote me a couple of days later and she said, well, guess what? I haven't had a diet soda since then. And she said, I even walked past it in the supermarket. It had absolutely no pull, nothing. And then a year and a half later, we were talking again, and I said, well, how's the diet soda addiction? And she said, what diet? Oh, that's right. She had
Wow.
completely forgotten that she was addicted to diet soda. Like it started with this to like, wait, what? I can't even, has anybody seen my addiction? I can't find it. So like tapping can work. I cannot even, I have tons of stories like this. I can't tell you how many miracles I've seen. And what a privilege to be able to midwife that kind of transformation.
Yeah, so that's such a great term. I love this notion of midwifing somebody's experience and transformation, because that's, as sort of coaches, that's what we do a lot. I feel like watching some of the tapping trainings that I've been lucky enough to be exposed to, I have seen people who were terribly afraid of water get into pools, or fear of heights. There's so many different levels at which tapping works. And I think food and cravings and addiction is definitely one of them. Um, So speaking of addiction, coming back to the place you used to work at, where you were a chef and you worked with women healing from love addiction. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, love addiction is no joke. Um, Love addiction is just as severe as any other addiction. So let's see. I mean, it's been a while, since I worked there, but so like, let's say for a woman, she knows that she's in a relationship with a partner who is emotionally unavailable
Mm,
and knows that this relationship is not supporting her self-esteem, but the addiction
mm,
can't let go, right? So there could be in a love addiction scenario, the thing that most compels us in that arena is the intermittent reward system. So let's just say a male-female relationship, just for the sake of the conversation.
okay.
So, oh my gosh, today, wow, he brought me flowers and took me out to dinner for my birthday. And oh, wow, it's so wonderful. And then he doesn't call for a week. So there can be like a huge high from
Mm-hmm.
the flowers and the dinner, and he disappears for a week or 2 weeks, and then there's an incredible withdrawal,
Mm,
an incredible, like, well, wait, where is he? And why isn't he talking to me? And I need him. And how come he's not here? And what did I do wrong? And, uh, that's like one kind of scenario
okay.
that love addiction can play out. And the way that this center, this facility used to work, it's not in business anymore, but all the staff was involved in the total treatment of the women who came through this facility. So as chef, I would be cooking food and somebody, the director would be working at the dining room table with somebody and I would hear the whole thing. So it can also, love addiction can also show up as avoidance attachment, like anxious attachment, avoidance attachment,
Mm,
all those different kind of disrupted styles of attachment.
mm-hmm.
I need somebody to be pursuing me so that I cannot be in I mean, it's just all the different games that we can play.
Right.
But the difference between like an ordinary sort of neurotic situation
Mm-hmm.
and a addiction is that addiction, the craving and the intense compulsion of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
That is
so
probably
I hope I'm
debilitating in some level, right? Where people don't even function normally because of
exactly.
this
Yeah.
obsession.
And like any other addiction, it shows up in every other aspect of your life, so maybe your work suffers or you get in a lot of debt because you're running up credit cards to fly across the country to see some guy who won't come see you or whatever.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
I'm sure a lot of people who listening to this can go like, oh no, I can identify with
Do I
that.
have a love addiction? But
Yeah,
it's
take the
interesting because even the thinking, when I think about being addicted to love, which is a great song, um, it's almost like this positive connection with like, oh, if you're going to be addicted to anything, be addicted to love. But I love that you explained a little bit of what that is and how it can be debilitating, right, when it's taken to this extreme case, because it's not a pleasant thing and it's not a healthy, it's not about having a healthy relationship with love or with a person. And it's more in the obsession and, addiction side. And so I wonder, thinking about self-love, which is so much of what I do, and obviously what you do, and helping women especially really connect and cultivate a deeper sense of self-love, and doing that as an actionable step or an actionable practice so that they can show love every day in that clinic, or even if you don't want to go back that far in your work up to today, how do you help women find that so that they don't go into the realm of the love addiction or just the harder ways to connect or to seek love outside of ourselves?
Well, I think it's really important to simply start with where you're at. So continuing on this thread of love addiction,
Mhm.
um, or food addiction or any addiction. You know, one of the things that we say with addiction is that there's in the 12-step rooms, you know, we talk about the God-sized hole. There's a God-sized hole in my soul. So there's a hole in my soul, and I'm trying to fill it up with food or with a love relationship or, you know, all the other, I don't have to list all the addictions that we could employ.
Mhm.
You know, our brain addiction out of anything.
Yeah.
So I tend to work with the heroine's journey, archetypes, you know, the archetypal journey of the heroine. So that journey begins with the ordinary world. It begins with crisis. It begins with breakdown. In the 12-step world, it's hitting bottom. You
Mhm.
know, it begin like by the time women come to see me, their lives are broken.
Mm.
You know, it's not working. I've been on a million stupid diets and I am not spending another penny on a diet. I know that there's something in my soul that is deeply pained, and I'm using food to stuff it down, and I don't want to do that anymore. And yet I can't stop myself on my own. So that's usually when women come to see me. And
Mm.
I say, great, congratulations, you know. No, I don't. But I mean, but in a way it is because, you know, hitting that bottom is such a it's such a beautiful, profound place to be. It's a great place to be, even though it feels awful,
Mhm.
because it's when we're in that bottom that we're willing.
Yeah.
You know, we've been broken, and if we're lucky, we've been broken open. So I tend to start with, okay, well, let's just sit here. Let's just sit here together in this bottom. Like, let me just sit next to you and
Mhm.
let's just sit here and let's just see what's here. Because when we stop clenching against what it is, you know, and that clenching can release itself much more easily when we have support.
Yeah.
You know, there's somebody with us who's actually just there with us. Um, there's little pearls of wisdom, little pieces of guidance in like within the wreckage,
Mhm.
you know. So, and that's where, of course, a lot of tapping comes in. Like, I feel horrible, I feel guilty. Oh my gosh, you know, I'm an awful person. So we go into those dark spaces. We go into them. So this isn't about like, okay, we're just going to pastiche over this
Right.
and put on a little I love myself happy face. No, 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 no. No, we're going down into the boiler room. And one time I was working with a woman, and at the end of our work together, I said, you know, it's been such a pleasure to work with you. And she said, I don't know if I can say it's been a pleasure to work with you, Marcella, but it's been very helpful. Sometimes women see me coming and they're like, oh no.
Yeah. I have to do the work.
Oh no, here she comes. She's going to ask me something and it's going to be painful. But it is like within, I mean, that's been what I've learned from my own experience, that within the wreckage, you know, within the trauma,
Mhm.
the traumas, there is always a gift, a blessing, a lesson. There's always some medicine inside of it, that when we summon the support and we have the courage, you know, to face it. And then what comes out on the other side? So, you know, we often end up going back into childhood. We go back into, you know, I mean, literally, it's a soul retrieval process. And so in the Women, Food, and Forgiveness Academy, while I'm doing that work, Mary Sheila is
Mm.
also working her magic, talking about, okay, let's talk about your blood sugar. Let's talk about your endocrine system. You know, let's talk about your hormones. Let's talk about all these medications that you're on. Let's talk about your habits. So
Mhm.
it's a kind of twofold, or really more multifold path.
Right.
But the net result is that, you know, a woman who comes through this academy and does the work can actually look herself in the mirror and say, I deeply love and accept myself, and mean it. It doesn't make her want to throw up like it used to make me want to throw up, you know, like
Mhm.
it becomes a truth that settles into the marrow of her bones.
Yes.
It's wonderful. such a privilege to watch.
I love hearing that because it is. I feel like there's so many paths to it, but that the things that don't feel authentic, or when you don't really go into the depth of what is actually keeping you from loving yourself. Like there's no way to get over that bridge without
Exactly.
actually getting deep down. And I do think finding a partner to help with that is so important. And so I'm glad that you have this whole setup so that you can support people, and then that you yourself have partnered with another practitioner to create this fuller experience so that they can address both things at once and figure out, once they have that new commitment to themselves, because now there's this deeper love. And I do believe that with self-love, there's just a different way that we commit to our goals. And it's not because other people think we should, or because our coach said we should, or because anything else that's external. It's just because we have this deep desire to really care for ourselves. And so that changes
Right.
everything. And then having the tools of like, okay, now how do I care for myself, right, is really important.
Yeah, that's really well said. Like we approach our goals very differently because we want it.
Yes.
We want it for ourselves rather than like, oh, Tai said I should, you know, have my fermented foods for breakfast or whatever, whatever. I'm eating this sauerkraut and I really don't like it, but it's supposed to be good for me.
Right. And I hear that so often, in over 10 years of being in practice. And it makes me a little like, oh, okay, there's something here we're not addressing. When I hear one of my clients say, well, I'm doing this because you said I should, or because, oh, I hate this, but I did it because you said it'd be good for me. It's like, no, 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 let's backtrack a little bit, because
Exactly.
yeah, if there's things that we hate and we're just doing because we were told they were healthy for us, if we're doing it and hating it, it's just not going to have a positive effect on our body. I don't care what, how good the thing itself is, right?
You know what? Can I tell another story about
Yeah,
that right there?
please.
Okay, so one of my clients was a woman, she had a habit of going to Sonic. And, she knew it wasn't great for her to go to Sonic. And Mary Sheila was working with her and trying to get her to eat some salads. And it's like, no, she wasn't eating the salad. She was going to Sonic.
So Sonic, you mean the chain Sonic, right?
Exactly, the fast food, the drive-through, you drive, you don't even go in, you drive through and get your food. So we looked at it and I said, what's the problem? How come, what is it? Like, how come you know you don't want to go to Sonic, but you're going anyway? And she said, well, yeah, I know the salad is good for me, but I don't want it. And just through a flash of intuition, I happened to say, where else have you heard, like, where else have you felt that way? That you didn't want food that was good for you? And we went back into a memory. This is Texas in the 1950s. She was like a 6-year-old girl. She's sitting at her supper table, and the meal is liver, canned peas, and like boxed mashed potatoes or something like that, like this horrific food.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to eat it as a little girl. And her mother was saying, eat it, it's good for you. Eat it, it's good for you. Eat it. And I said, and her mother would make her sit there until she
Wow.
ate every bite. And she would eat it and then go throw up. And I said to her, okay, do you understand that you associate healthy food with torture? No wonder you're going to Sonic. Of course you're going to Sonic.
Yes.
So we did some tapping and again, matrix reimprinting and the whole soul retrieval process. And once we were able to break that, she sent me an email a while later and she said, I just poached a chicken breast and I ate some spinach. It's a good start.
Wow. Yeah.
So all of this to say, uh, everything that we think, like if we're really about self, if we're like real self-love, everything that we think is bad or wrong or flawed or problematic or disgusting actually has within it those aspects of our character that we would rather reject contain precisely within them the seeds that we need for our deepest healing and transformation. and therefore are worthy of our love and respect.
Mm. Yes. Amen.
Preach.
Yes, and hard as it is to go into it, because some people have gotten really good at avoiding that, the seed, everything that is creating whatever friction is happening in their lives. It's can be easier to just not address it and keep going,
Yeah. Well, we
making
live in a culture that completely
right
supports that.
exterior adjustments only. And
Yeah.
and now we have drugs that can do that too, even though they come with lots of side effects. And so I do believe that as far as experiencing real freedom from cravings, or freedom from all the judgy thoughts and all of that, that there's no way to get to that point unless you're addressing what is causing the thoughts and the cravings in the first place.
Yeah.
So I am wondering if we could, and I'm just trying to figure out if this would be most helpful to our listeners, whether we do a brief sample of how you work with people, and you can work with me, I'll volunteer, or if you would prefer to talk more about your program and things that you have coming up, and maybe if you want to mention any courses that you have available, spend a little time there so that we can wrap about 10 minutes, and I'll edit.
I think we can do both. I'll just say right now, before we get into the tapping, that you can find me at womenfoodandforgiveness.com. Women, Food and Forgiveness. I do have a free monthly event that I hold called the Undieters Club. It's the second Saturday morning of every month, and it's a free event. You get to work with me live online for free, and we explore topics connected to how we reclaim our soul from restrictive dieting. So yeah, just come find me. I've got all kinds of things. My academy, yeah, you can set up a free illumination call with me to see if it's a fit for you to join. Just come find me there. That's all we need to say about that. And so, yeah, let's do some tapping.
Lovely. Okay. Oh my gosh. What would you suggest as far as a theme? Of course, I can think of a few, but having a sort of restricted time.
So this is January that we're having this conversation, and this is the new year, and weight loss is on a lot of women's minds. One of the biggest beliefs that I encounter with women is the belief that weight loss has to be hard, that I have to punish myself, that I have to deprive myself, that I'm bad for being overweight to begin with, etc. So that's a place where we could certainly go. And I'll bet if there are women listening to this going, yes, yes, please.
That's wonderful. Yeah, let's do it. It's very interesting because I just started a very small group with a very special weight loss program. And this is going to be so helpful to me and to everybody in there, so they can send this for them to listen to. And for myself, it's interesting. I realized too, as a holistic nutritionist, the pressure I put on myself to look a certain way, or if I'm a pound over, it's like, oh my God, what's happening? What's my, and so I realized that I still have some tightness, some like control issues around it, because I don't know if it's just this thing about, I really, really practice what I preach, and it's really important for me to model good health. But what does that mean exactly? And what does that mean on a scale for me? That's all very, I don't know. There's not one answer. And so I do find myself, even though I've been doing this work for a long time, and the self-love and all of it, there are times in which I go, boom, straight to the critic, straight to the how are you going to fix this? There's a problem. And so I love, let's do this right now.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So vulnerable. Here we go, guys.
Oh yeah, I know. See, that's it. The women see me coming and they're like, oh shoot. Oh no. Here she comes. Okay, so for you and for I'm sure many, many, many women who are watching this, I blame myself for every pound I gain. Does that resonate? Does that sound right? It's important with tapping to find the right language.
Right, let's find the right language. It's less about blaming and more about like, how can I control, like, it's almost like, oh, something is going out of control, like something is not staying. You just think about this for one moment. So instead of blaming, it's more about losing control. Why don't we try with the blaming? I just can't find what other active.
I'm afraid to lose control over my body weight.
Yes, perfect. That
Good.
rings true.
Okay, so with tapping, the first thing is to really get clear on what the issue is.
Mhm.
And then, okay, so the emotion is fear. Identifying the emotion is the next part.
Yeah.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the strongest, how strong is that fear when it comes up?
Oh, that fear is like 9. And to get, as a background,
Okay, so
I
while we're talking, let's just tap on the
okay,
collarbone.
I'll start. But yeah,
Mhm.
so my parents and my sister overweight. My sister actually had bariatric surgery. So I feel like even though I take good care of myself and have a lot of tools at my disposal, I do live with this fear that, like, what if all of a sudden some gene gets turned on and I'm like, and I lose control? And how can I help people if I gain weight? So yes,
Yeah.
that's a strong feeling, strong
Okay.
fear. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's really amazing that you were able to plug into that right off the bat, because that, like, often that kind of insight comes after like a round or two of tapping. So you're obviously very aware of this issue. Yeah. Okay, so it's big.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one. Okay. So the way that I tap, let's just start by tapping. We'll just bump the hands together. And sometimes you can do it like this. You'll see people do it all kinds of ways. This is my way now these days.
Okay.
So even though I feel really afraid,
Even though I feel really afraid.
oh gosh, if I gain 1 pound,
If I gain 1 pound,
I get really, really scared.
I get scared.
I go into a panic.
I get panicked.
Okay. All right, good. Let's take a breath here. In and out of the nose.
Mm,
Okay. All right. I totally accept that this is what happens.
I totally accept that this is what happens.
There's some reason for it.
There's good reason for it.
Okay, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
I love myself no matter what.
I love myself no matter what.
I get really, really scared.
I get really, really scared.
I get totally scared.
I get totally scared.
I can go into a total panic.
I can go into a total panic.
Stepping on that scale,
Stepping on the scale.
and if I've gained even 1 pound,
And if I've gained a pound,
oh no.
oh no, what does this,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
yep, what does this mean?
What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've gained a pound. Oh no.
I've gained a pound. What's happening?
What's happening? Am I going to be like my sister?
Am I gonna be like my sister?
Is some gene going to switch on
Is some gene gonna switch on?
and I'm going to gain tons of weight,
And I'm gonna gain tons of weight
lose total control of health?
and lose control over my health. And it's hard even saying this.
Okay, what makes it hard to
Mm.
say it?
Oh, it's just like, but I'm speaking out loud, this fear is like, ugh, I don't even want to say these words.
And I don't even want to say these words. They're so scary.
And I don't even want to say these words. They're so scary.
Okay, let's take a breath here, Thais, on the collarbone.
Mm.
Okay. All this fear,
All this fear,
all this fear,
all this fear,
this really, really old fear.
this really, really old fear,
I've had it for so long,
which was so long,
gaining even a pound of weight
gaining even a pound of weight,
terrifies me,
terrifies me,
throws me into a panic.
throws me into a panic.
Okay, I'm trying to control it.
I'm trying to control it.
I'm trying to keep it all under control.
I'm trying to keep it all under control.
Yeah, okay. Ah, hmm. Well, and that works to a certain degree, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But there's kind of like the thing that I'm getting, it's like the wolf at the door kind of thing. Like there's this kind of like a specter.
Mm,
There's like a ghost of something, like like, oh, something can come and take over, right?
mhm.
Like this, like a gene could switch on without my consent, and suddenly I'm going to be 300 pounds and need a sleeve. Yeah. Okay.
Ah,
Whatever this fear,
whatever this fear,
wherever it comes from,
wherever it comes from,
whatever it means to me,
whatever it means to me,
totally accept that I have this.
totally accept that I have this.
I send love to my fear.
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 I understand.
I understand.
Yeah, it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
Everything's okay today.
Everything's okay today.
It's just 1 pound.
It's just 1 pound.
Yeah, it's not the end of my life or end of the world.
Not the end of the world or my life.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
I love myself exactly as I am.
I love myself exactly as I am.
Yeah. And even I send love to this fear.
And I send love to this fear.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Stretch. That's it. That's it. Okay. Take a drink of water.
Yeah.
Yep. hmm Okay. So after the tapping, you were at a 9 or a 10. Like, how's the fear now? How does it feel?
Mm. Um, it's so funny to have, I have the inability to access the fear right now, like as it bubbled up, when we started talking about it. And also I was feeling vulnerable and we're sharing this, but now I'm like, oh, so where is that fear? It's like, well, where is it? It's much lower. I maybe a 3, maybe a 4. I feel like it's still there. I don't,
Yeah.
it's not completely gone, but it's not just alive. Um, yeah, in the same way.
Good. That's a big drop.
Yeah.
That's a big drop. And so that's often what happens with the first round of tapping. And the question becomes, what makes it not a 0? So here's what I'm gonna guess here.
Right.
So like if we were working together, if we were actually working together as a practitioner and a client, I
Mm-hmm.
might ask you, okay, where else is this fear of the loss of control showing up in your life? Or where did it show up in your history? Right? Like it happens to be landing right now on the number on the scale, but it's not about the number on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else. So where might there have been a place where control was taken away or it just wasn't available? And there was that panic. And then we go, we keep peeling, 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 peeling until we get to some core piece that we can set it free.
Yes. So it's so wonderful. And I love how deep you go into it, because I think it can also be easy to stay on the surface of things, especially when you see a decrease and it's like, great, and now you can move more comfortably in the world, but there's
Yeah.
still the the something, right? That might be even more difficult to look at. And like I said, like the feeling uncomfortable of even saying certain things. I think I've definitely come from this line of thinking of like, don't put anything out in the world that you don't want to see manifest. And so sometimes saying certain things out loud can be really have a lot of power. And so, but it's so important to recognize what it is. What is the story? Where is that little hum that's always creating, a certain dissonance in how you live your life if you don't actually say it out loud, and if you don't look at it and acknowledge it. So
Exactly.
yeah, thank you. And even, like for example, panic, right? That felt like a very big word because I was like, oh, I don't panic necessarily. At the same time, saying it because it's like, well, there's a concern and there's a worry, and that worry is connected to the fear that's connected to um, other things, right? And that taking away a little bit of that self-love ultimately is what that fear, I think, does, right? Is creating a little distance from that full embodiment of self-love. So
Mm. Well,
yeah.
you said everybody in your family was overweight
Mm-hmm.
and your sister had gastric bypass.
Yes.
Okay. So that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
So so I'm gonna just kind of go out on a limb here and say, okay, so this my sense is that like me, I mean, I had not no people in my family weren't overweight, but there were different circumstances. But you know, we so in the family constellation, it's like we hold the healing note.
Mm.
We're like the chimney for the emotional expression, or we hold the healing vein that maybe others can't quite realize.
Yes.
And there's a sense of separation, like you're the odd one. You don't fit in. Like, wait, why she's thin, or she's not overweight like we are. What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I
So
live in another country, so there's like all these
yeah.
layers. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So they're like, so again, it's amazing what, like, you're looking at the number on the scale. There's a universe in there.
Yes.
Right?
I love
Yeah.
that. Just a question of like, when we get concerned about anything about health, but it's this asking ourselves like, what is the universe contained in here? And that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope that all of our audiences, mine and yours, can get a lot from this video. And if people can follow along, would you suggest that, even though that was sort of my tapping, but that if people feel compelled and they feel like this relates to their experience, that they could follow along and do it for themselves, even though it's not live? Will there be some benefit there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, wonderful. So I invite everyone to follow along and then just take notes. If you don't have somebody to talk to about it, you could just write down, your level when you first start, write it down again at the end, and just, take a moment to sit with it and really feel into, whether if it's a fear very much like mine, or if it's something else that you just use this experience as kind of the template for then doing your own tapping. And then write to us, let us know. You can post comments in the channel. And so there are many ways to get involved. And thank you
Well,
so much, Marcella, for your time and your generosity of spirit. It's so wonderful to have you.
well, thank you, Thais. What a gift. What a gift to be able to have this conversation with you. Yeah, it's wonderful after all these years.
Yes, finally connected. Feels good.